Welcome back to the Contrarian, everybody. Today I'll be talking about a much loved sector in the last year and kind of an unlikely sector. I think a year ago, if you had said that Nvidia would be up 300-400% in the next year, that'd be a pretty bold statement because all of the semiconductor stocks pretty much across the board were hit pretty hard back in the sell-off during 2022. And they've actually rallied very strongly since the end of that sell-off, to where now a lot of these ETFs that encompass semiconductors are up to new all-time highs. Of course, Nvidia itself is off to new all-time highs, and it's been up some 300 or 400%. But other semiconductors have kind of yet to catch up. There's some that are still playing catch-up rallies of sorts, and there's a lot of people kind of in the FinTwit space that, in the last year have maybe correctly labeled this as a AI bubble, bubble quote unquotes, because there's maybe not a whole lot of fundamentals driving it yet, except a lot of hype. At least that might seem like it on the surface. It might seem like there's really nothing there except hype and the whole news-driven cycle that tends to get behind certain sectors, whether it's the EV space or crypto or fill in the blank. But today I'll maybe take a little more nuanced of an approach to looking at the semiconductor space, kind of looking at why I actually think it could still perform well in coming months, even though it is already at pretty, generous valuations given to a lot of the stocks in the space. It could run a lot further in my honest opinion. Obviously, I'm not saying that this would be some sort of fundamentally justified valuation, more so this cycle of fear of missing out, of expectations, analysts leapfrogging each other on raising their price targets on certain companies, on the whole sector, basically assigning more value, total available market, beginning to raise that as well as expectations begin to run away from analysts and from people in general. It is human nature to extrapolate and get way too excited too early, even though in this whole AI space long term there is probably a lot of available market here. It could be the case where analysts' expectations are getting away from them. But today what really prompted me to talk about this is the reaction of investors with AMD are now releasing a new chip that is going to rival Nvidia. Of course, this doesn't necessarily expand the total AI market or chip market as a whole, but it really boosted AMD's stock, but also semiconductors across the board were boosted on this, just AMD releasing this. So basically, it's a new chip that AMD released. AMD shares rose about 10% Thursday to close at $128, marking the stock's best day since May and the highest closing price since June. The surge comes a day after it launched a new artificial intelligence chip that will compete against Nvidia to power AI applications. This is just an article I'm reading on CNBC right now that came out today. But on Wednesday, AMD CEO Lisa Su discussed the previously announced Instinct MI300X, a large graphics processor designed for AI-oriented servers. And she said that Microsoft and Meta had committed to using the chip. So they have some clients lined up for this chip. It's maybe a newer type of chip that Nvidia's been really specializing in the last year. Their earnings have really killed it in the last year because they have been so specified, and not that many other semiconductor manufacturers have been able to compete with Nvidia up until now. So AMD is going to join this space. The rise in shares suggests investors believe the chip maker can take a chunk of the AI chip market from Nvidia. So Lisa Su is saying, I think it's clear to say that Nvidia has to be the vast majority of that right now, but she believes it could be 400 billion plus in 2027, and that AMD could get a nice piece of that. So AMD investors are beginning to price in a growth of their product sector, which really has not been there as much until now. And apparently, she believes that they can actually grow this pretty rapidly in the coming years. I mean, 2027, that is 4 years away now. So, a lot can happen in 4 years, but that would be pretty rapid growth. Um, for the AI chip market to be $400 billion. Um, of course, this would also mean that earnings in Nvidia would grow massively as well as a result. So it could be said that Nvidia would also grow as a result of this. And this, in my opinion, kind of does show a lot of the mentality we've seen in the semiconductor space in the last year, maybe even just in recent months, where analysts, CEOs kind of let their expectations get out of reality. But that's not to say that there is nothing here, that there isn't any growth potential here. But it is saying that, it's probably the case where this AI driven hype isn't really done playing out yet. In my opinion, it's not done playing out yet in these stocks, semiconductors specifically. But it could also play out in other tech stocks as well. I know Microsoft and Meta are also trying to get into the AI space. I mean, what tech company isn't trying to get into the AI space? But specifically trying to grow their revenue in the AI space and actually having done that successfully, it's a lot more selective than perhaps just saying you want to develop an AI um, team in your company. That's an easy thing to do, whereas actually gathering some of that available market is harder to do. All that being said, Nvidia, AMD, likely a lot of other semiconductor stocks out there, in my opinion, are still going to do pretty well in coming months. I know that it's somewhat of a bold statement to make on my part, perhaps. I'm not saying that based off of any sort of fundamental assessment. It's more so sentiment driven. Technicals as well. Once stocks begin breaking out to new all-time highs, you get kind of this fear of missing out, momentum type of movement underlying a stock. It is difficult to predict where the top is. Um, at that point, it becomes almost better to look at sentiment in terms of trying to predict a top, because once you have everybody in who can possibly be into a stock or a sector or even the entire stock market, that is almost when a top would be more likely to be present. Whereas right now, in my assessment, there's still a lot of skepticism in the markets as a whole, a lot of dry powder of cash that people have on the sidelines that could further drive up prices out there. So, all that being said, let me know what you think about this video in the comment section below on AI, semiconductors. Is this a bubble that's about to pop? Is it going to get bigger as I am arguing? Is there actually any fundamental value in AI? I'd love to hear what you have to think. Hope to see all of you again at some point.